Hello my friends, Simon here, and in this episode I'm going to tell you how an individual broke into two strangers' homes in the middle of the night and beat one of the people in those homes, and yet was found to be not guilty, and moreover not crazy. So he was not sentenced to a custodial sentence of imprisonment, and he was not detained in a psychiatric institution, which is often the case when a person is found to be not guilty by criminal insanity, for example. They would then be detained in a psychiatric institution indefinitely. The following information does not constitute legal advice. As always, consult a lawyer. So the case I'm going to talk to you today about is called Queen and Brown. It's a 2020 decision from the Alberta Court of Queen's Bench, number 166. So Mr. Brown was a 27-year-old university student in his final year. He had a job lined up at a large oil company after graduation, and he was a captain of his university hockey team. Mr. Brown went out partying one evening with some friends at one of their houses. There was about 5 to 7 people over the course of the evening present. They were drinking, playing party games, watching Netflix, eating some magic mushrooms, and Mr. Brown had quite a bit of alcohol. He drank about 10 mixed vodka and ginger ales, and 3 to 4 beers, and at least 1.5 grams of magic mushrooms, possibly more. So basically an unknown amount of drugs, psychedelics mixed with alcohol. Mr. Brown begins to feel like he's losing his grip on reality at about 1:30 in the morning, and he blacks out. He wakes up in the hospital, he kind of fuzzy sees his girlfriend, he wakes up again and he's in prison, and police are charging him break and enter with commission of an indictable offense for 2 counts. So the first count was with aggravated assault, the second count was with mischief, that's destruction of property. So a little bit about these offenses. Aggravated assault means the intentional application of force to the complainant without their consent in a manner that wounds, maims, disfigures, or endangers the life of the complainant. And mischief to property, specifically section 430, subsection 1, paragraph A, destruction of property, less than $5,000 can be an indictable offense. So 2 break and enters with the commission of indictable offenses, both have life sentences. So let's talk about the perspective of the fellow partier. So his friends were there at the house that evening, and they're having a good time, laughing, watching Netflix, putting their feet up and relaxing. And they see Mr. Brown begin to be withdrawn. He goes to lay on the bed, gets back up again, lays back down again, comes out naked, and then runs out of the house. So the friends begin to chase after him. It's about minus 20 degrees centigrade outside. So that's about 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Freezing cold, snowy. He's totally naked. And so they kind of yell and chase after him, but he runs away. Okay, Miss Hamnet is a university professor. She lives in a house nearby, and she wakes up to a crashing sound. She goes down to investigate, and a large presence begins to beat her with some blunt object. Turned out to be a broom handle of some sort. He beats her and beats her on the arm, shoulder, hand, wrist, until it's gushing with blood. So maims her hand. But she's able to have the composure to escape from Mr. Brown. So she escapes to the bathroom, binds up her wound because of the blood loss, and then she's able to get past Mr. Brown to the neighbor's house, Mr. Crone. Mr. Crone comes outside, sees a man trying to get into vehicles outside, and he's completely naked. The man is completely naked, so Mr. Crone backs inside. Okay, so about 5 in the morning, the Varshnys, also living in the nearby house, hear a smashing glass. And they wake up, Mr. Varshney yells, who's there? And they hear yelling, roaring sounds from downstairs. So the police arrive and they follow a trail of blood from, turns out, Mr. Brown's feet, his bare feet. And they find Mr. Brown in the bathroom floor of the Varshney's house. He's compliant, he follows what the police tell him to do, and he kind of gradually wakes up. He's very confused. Okay, so again, Mr. Brown admitted that he broke and entered the two houses, smashed the glass of the Varshney's house. He used a statue that was in their yard to smash the glass, and that he applied force to Miss Hamnet, wounding, maiming, disfiguring, or endangering her life. But did Mr. Brown willfully destroy the property or intentionally apply force to Miss Hamnet? This argument of self-induced intoxication has been very controversial in past years in Canada, and the law has actually changed several times, gone back and forth and back and forth. Most recently, the Parliament introduced Section 33.1 of the Criminal Code of Canada that says it's not a defense. Self-induced intoxication, that a person voluntarily intoxicated themselves with drugs and alcohol, and so they lacked the voluntariness or general intent required to commit any offense involving assault or interfering with the bodily integrity of another person or threatening the bodily integrity of another person. So self-induced intoxication is not a defense. Essentially, the elected officials of Canada decided that we should have a substituted mens rea, so that if a person decides to get drunk, or take drugs, they are departing so markedly from the standard of reasonable care expected in Canadian society that they are guilty. That when a person decides to take drugs and alcohol in that way, they essentially are deciding to commit the assault or threat. So Mr. Brown says that this is not constitutional, that a person does require some sort of intent to be guilty of a crime. So he introduces expert evidence, which is required to make this kind of constitutional claims. They're going to require good evidence. So expert evidence, he gets two medical experts to testify. Both medical experts, however Mr. Brown was involved with them, they both were of the opinion, neutral opinion, that Mr. Brown was likely experiencing automatism at the time of the alleged offenses. And he was unaware of his surroundings, that the details of the evidence corresponded with the medical criteria for delirium, and that he was in a state of delirium at the time of the offenses. So the court acquitted Mr. Brown on both counts. So, one interesting detail that I would point out is that this departing markedly from the standard of reasonable care expected in Canadian society, in that possession of magic mushrooms is still illegal. But the lawyers pointed out that, indeed, the growing evidence is that people who take magic mushrooms are less likely to be violent than people who do not take magic mushrooms. So there's limited evidence on that. Currently, the research is based on some prisoners and people who, domestic violence context. But it's important to point out that there's very little evidence that a person who takes magic mushrooms would be violent towards other people. It's in fact the other way around. Alcohol, not so much. So mixing alcohol and the magic mushrooms certainly is not a good idea. I don't think anybody in Canada should be mixing alcohol and magic mushrooms by any means. That's not a condolence to possess illegal drugs, but it is pointing out that it is not illegal to take drugs. It is illegal to possess drugs. So basically, this is a Superior Court decision in Alberta. So we have yet to see whether more cases like this will follow, more Superior Court decisions, and possibly more Court of Appeal decisions in any province across Canada. Whether this will spread to other provinces. Again, the law has gone back and forth on this several times, but this case represents the proposition that a person requires voluntariness or general intent. And so if they're advanced intoxication, they're blacked out, they're not present, it doesn't mean that they're crazy. It doesn't mean they need to go to a psychiatric institution. It doesn't mean that they're a risk that they will do this ever again. Certainly not. But that they need some sort of intent to commit the offense. That's all, my friends. I hope you keep well, and I'll talk to you next time.